Let's get started. Thank you all for coming. Warm night here at the town hall. For some reason our air conditioning went out today, so we'll do the best we can. Get up. We've shut the heat
I had to
off.
guess Tony's turned it off for the year.
Yeah, we're saving your tax dollars there, so
We'll make it as quick as possible.
get up, use the bathroom, get water as you need, but we'll get back into it. We gave you out some of the agenda we had from last week. We'll continue with our education tonight of some of the background stuff we have, and give you guys a chance to kind of start talking as well. Some of the initial stuff we want to get into, and we've got some maps up on the wall. That's kind of a continuation of last week. Tech's going to bring them up on the screen so you don't have to crack your necks. But just if we take a break again, you can look at it. One of the things we started to broach and talk about last week was utilities and some of the limitations of the utilities that we have. One of our biggest one is limitations in sanitary sewer. We basically are fed by three main basins. The north part of our town goes to Webster, feeds into the Webster sewer treatment plant, both village and to the town. Right now they're undergoing an $11 million reval upgrade to the Webster sewer treatment plant. So we're kind of on a hold on some of our stuff flowing to the north to see what the impact fees are, what availability they have, and what's going on their end. The vast majority of our sewer goes to the west, drains to Van Laer, goes through Department of Environmental Services, to the county, to the interceptor sewer kind of down in Panorama, and then cuts up through the valley and then heads up into Webster and then eventually gets pumped up to Van Laer for treatment. And then the last part of our sewer feeds from the south. Eventually that goes to Van Laer as well, but it drains into Perrington. So we've got some limitation on how much sewage and drainage we have into Perrington. So the ZAC has up right now, kind of the purple is where our mains are. As we've kind of spoken before, 250 is a semi-dividing line in the town. We have sewer on most of everything west of 250, but east of 250 becomes more rural, and that kind of established some of our early zoning, that 1981 changeover, knowing that we don't have sewer capacity out there. So with septic, currently health department requires at least of 1 acre zoning for a septic system, and then transitions into 2 acres as you go east. So as you look, you don't see any purple on the east side. That's where we don't have sanitary sewer currently. If that changes and things transition out, then obviously there'd be more opportunity for future development, but that is kind of some of the restraints, constrictions we currently have under sanitary sewers. Any questions on sanitary? Not meaning to make you guys experts, but just kind of give you an overview of.
Yeah, what does it mean by unclassified? So you have some of these are unclassified sewer mains. What does that mean?
It may just be.
Probably don't know the length of the
We
pipe.
just may not know the size of it. Some of them are owned by the county, so they're either under interceptor sewers. We own all of our own sewers, except for the interceptor.
Some are private too, it looks like.
Well, I'm talking about the one that runs up the neighborhood through Parkview.
That's probably just, it hasn't been.
That has been updated.
It's a new sewer.
Yeah.
That's because it's new, so we haven't just done the final as-built of it yet. Once the final as-built are in, then those will be incorporated into our system with the size and everything else. But as you know, it's new development, so that was kind of the proposed alignment. Once we get the final as-built, we'll dump all that information into our system, and then we'll have size of pipes and everything else.
So basically, if they're marked unclassified, it's because they're either not updated or private.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So, but all that neighborhood is owned by the town of Penfield.
A lot of this mapping originally came from just projects as they developed in town. It's not all survey accurate. We weren't out there measuring distances and depths of pipes and sizes. It was just what did we have as information initially from all of our previous projects. We just went backwards through that and kind of turned it into a digital representation.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
Mark, about what percentage of residences in total in Penfield are sanitary sewer versus septic or other, roughly?
That's a good question. Probably, I mean, the vast majority of development is in the west, so I would say probably, guessing 80%.
All housing tracts are.
Yeah.
Any
I would guess
subdivision,
maybe
you see high density
80%.
is.
I mean, obviously, there's quite a bit of acreage in East Penfield, you're probably 60-40 acreage-wise, or 55-45 acreage.
But in terms of residences, units, it's more like...
Pretty much any new
80,
subdivision, it's been very rare for any new subdivision to go in with septic. Sweets View Drive is one of the few that's kind of gone in recently. Hermance Road, we talked about last week, is kind of one of those. But usually the stuff that goes in is in larger lot developments. There's not really been a trend for people wanting septic systems in newer home developments. Larger lot developments, yes, but not.
You really can't, the
Large
health department
tractor.
doesn't allow it anymore anyways. If you have a smaller lot, you're seeing a lot of these lots being smaller now because of Ryan and a couple of others, but the Monroe County Health Department will require all houses that are smaller lots to be on sanitary sewers.
In at least 1 acre in size, just so there's enough area to put in a system and then an expansion area on top of that for the future. So that's kind of our quick overview on sanitary sewers. Did want to talk about storm sewers. Those come up. Drainage obviously is always a big conversation of any new development is drainage, maintaining our existing streams, ponds. So we've gone through a couple of different iterations in the storm sewer world, and Roland, I'm sure you can weigh in as well on storm sewer. But everybody back in the day, you had a cistern at your house, you had rain barrels, you had stormwater collection at your house, you treated it on the property. 70s, 80s, 90s, the plan was let's pipe it, let's get it down the street, let's put it in a pond and treat it down the end of the street rather than at our house. So that's kind of how development progressed. So every neighborhood had a pond, has a pond. We have over 168 ponds in the town of Penfield that we own and maintain. There's others above and beyond that are private, that are maintained by them. So we manage that many. Now DEC is kind of rolling back the other way. Now you've seen more stuff back towards rain gardens, rain barrels, infiltration basins. They found out that that's not doing as well for the groundwater. You're not recharging it back into the soil. We're putting it down the street, and we're not getting as good a treatment as you would individual properties. We're kind of going back the other way.
The nature of the ponds have changed.
Yeah, and the ponds have changed. I mean, everybody remembers, there used to be dry ponds in front of Wegmans with basically empty bathtubs, and a storm would come, they'd fill up, and the storm was over to go away. So you dealt with water quantity, not with water quality. So that was kind of the biggest thing for a long time, is let's just handle things don't flood. We'll let it fill up like a bathtub, a bigger pipe coming in, a smaller pipe going out. We throttle it. Once the storm's over, it goes away. Just found out whatever basically comes in goes out. It doesn't clean it, doesn't do anything else with it. So finding out nature does a great job of treating itself, creating more back to wetland ponds and having cattails around ponds and everything else. So that's a lot of education stuff that we do, is people have ponds near their house and call up and say, hey, my pond's got cattails and birds and frogs and fish in it. And go, sounds like it's working just fine to us. It's doing what it's supposed to be doing, and nature's doing its job. Where a lot of people that, some of our education for builders build new houses next to the ponds, and when it's brand new, it looks pretty, and everybody thinks, hey, I got waterfront property, I got lakefront property, and builders have been charging premiums for waterfront property, not realizing it can be a great amenity. It's a stormwater treatment unit, but
You're not going swimming.
it's not meant to be a beach. It's not meant to have sand on it and have little kayaks and canoes and stuff on it. So that's always some education for us. But again, you can kind of see, it's hard to see, but the brown all over the screen is all of our storm pipes for each neighborhood. So we've got mapped all of our catch basins, all of our storm sewers, and then the blue is all the ponds for each individual neighborhood. So any new development, has to handle their stormwater treatment somehow. Our requirements require you can let 20% less water off your site than prior to development. So if it's a farm field today, it's a woods today, you have to do an evaluation of that. Say you let off 10 CFS of water, it's cubic feet per second. After development, you have to let off 8. Obviously, you're going to let off more water eventually, but it's the rate that it comes off at. So we have you regulate it so it's minimizing the impact of the stream, as well as you have to handle the water quality with that and everything else. The town of Penfield work with the town board often to do stream cleanings and maintain our overall creeks and streams. Commission Ditch, we've been doing quite a bit of work in Commission Ditch in the east to reestablish those. We've got to do a lot of permitting with the DEC and the Army Corps, work with our watershed committee to keep those going. So it is kind of an ongoing effort to keep stormwater up and keep drainage functioning, but it's an important part of each new development that comes in, or even existing infrastructure, to keep that up and keep that all maintained. Any questions on storm sewers and functionality. And then the other piece of infrastructure, obviously, everyone knows our roads, but also Penfield's had a strong stance on sidewalks. This is something the board's committed to. I think our first sidewalk policy was back in 1979. We've updated it every few years, and actually just updated it most recently in 2018, requiring new developments to install sidewalks along their frontage. So each new development comes in, they're required to put sidewalks along their main frontages as well as portions internally. That all runs through the town board. If there's a waiver granted, they pay money back into the general sidewalk fund to continue doing the frontages. So developers, I know we always get comments that sometimes we have sidewalks that go nowhere, but they put their sidewalk frontages in, and then, as the town board dedicates money each year to, filling in those gaps, and we're gonna go back and try to fill in the gaps in between to complete our linkages. But that's been something that's been very important to the town board for many, many years is the sidewalks. I think it continues to be an asset of the town, and especially with the walkability and bikeability and everything else that brings people to Penfield is, I think, as some is the sidewalks and being able to get around and have safe pedestrian linkages through the town. So I think that's one of the things, obviously, as we look at the comp plan and move forward, hopefully this group agrees that continuing that and continuing walkability is in the best keeping with the town. Questions, comments? So those are on the maps on the wall, so if at a break, or if anybody, I think we also uploaded those to the Google Docs page.
Yep.
So those are on there if anybody wants to look at those. And then I say I can answer more questions about those, but just kind of want to run through those as we're talking about different areas of town and future developments or zonings or areas of the town.
Good?
Good.
All right, my turn.
Go for it.
All right. This is a very yellow map. And we all have one. We want to make sure we include this as a printout for you. It's going to be an important map going forward. It's called our existing land use map, and the previous comp plan had one in it, similar theme. And at the bottom, it has a legend, a key that kind of tells you what each one of those colors represents. Clearly, as we've probably stated before, much of the town is currently used, not just zoned, but used as single-family residential uses on the property. And you go through that key, you can kind of see some multifamily, you see some apartment developments, spots of commercial activity, other areas that include municipal uses, utilities. The darker yellow is kind of what we have identified as, is probably missing some, but agricultural uses in there as well. So that kind of gives you an idea of the uses that Mark was talking about last time when he went over all the zoning districts and what's permitted on land, but this gives you an idea of what's actually being used on the land. The same thing, it again echoes that we have over 13,000 parcels, and very few of them are zoned commercial and used as commercial uses. And in addition, what this could also help kind of put into perspective is that we have a lot of parkland too existing. That green that you see are parks that are either managed by the town or the county. And there's a lot of acreage there, and a lot of it is actively used. And we find, and we've kind of looking through our numbers, there's actually more recreational land that's being used right now than there is commercial in the town. And that was before the recent purchase of the Shiloh Pines Golf Course. So the town continues to encourage recreational activities in the town. Again, it kind of goes off that topic of wellness and a more active, a more healthier lifestyle, and we continue to give those opportunities to people. But it also helps, again, communicate that there's still a lot of commercial land that's out there, and probably room to improve upon that as well. So that's that portion of it, hang on to this map. It's going to be important as we go forward. It's been uploaded into Google Drive as well. Other things we wanted to talk about tonight, this kind of starts the topic of that, is planning goals. So we as planners, we have planning evolves as everything goes along, just like all the trends in businesses and healthcare and everything. Planning also evolves too. You know, we have zoning that dictates everything that we can do on land, but we try to do the best practices too with that. Today it's called smart growth development. You know, we've heard terms such as like urban renewal, other things that have happened in the past that have given kind of a false idea of how to kind of fix a lot of development that took place in the 60s and 70s, post-war development, where we just saw sprawl just go crazy and everyone just fled cities basically. Smart growth is kind of the first thing that's come around to offer a creative solution to that, where you can kind of control better how the suburbs are developed, where it's not just one subdivision after the next, after the next, after the next. And mixed use was an example of that. Rezoning a portion of the town to mixed use was our first attempt at using smart growth to our advantage as planners, where you can mix uses together, offer some density, offer a variety of housing options, and you know, we're happy to see that it's here. We're happy that we have 2 applications before us right now with the planning board, and we continue to work towards making those viable projects. If you look at the definition of smart growth, you'll see that it's an approach to development that encourages a mix of building types and uses, diverse housing, transportation options, development within existing neighborhoods, and community engagement. So when you look at development within existing neighborhoods, you can look at an area like the Four Corners in town, where we're always trying to take that existing built environment and make the most of it. New projects come in, new business owners come in, they look to redevelop what's there, or they look to try and incorporate a different use there. It's a smaller footprint to work in, so it's easier to manage, but it's an example of different uses within one area of the town. So we do have that was kind of like our first, what's the word I'm looking for? Not a first attempt, but it was our only like mixed use like situation before we actually created a mixed use zoning district. So it's a unique area. Let's see here. You want to talk a little bit about the economic development as part of our planning goals?
Do you have the zoning map?
We got all kinds of maps.
So the town of Penfield, as Zach had mentioned earlier, it has about 13,000 parcels, probably a little bit more now. The 13,000 parcels, it only has about 380 plus or minus properties that are zoned for limited industrial or commercial use.
How many did you say, Jim?
Pardon?
How many are zoned for commercial?
About 380 plus or minus.
Okay.
We have 5 different zoning districts that are I consider to be commercial districts. Empire Boulevard, up by Baytown Plaza, down here at LaSalle's Landing, Panorama Plaza, 250 and 441 Wegmans Target, and Browncroft Corners. That area is also a business district. The mixed-use district is the result of us not wanting to have any more big box development in Penfield. We're finding that it's not desirable to have that. We've seen a lot of big boxes with a lot of business, and you're stuck with a building that you can't do anything with. As a result, the town now has about an occupancy rate, generally speaking, of about 93 or 94% of full occupancy. We always have about 5 or 6% of vacancies. Some of those vacancies are very visible to the public, which kind of makes it worse than it really is. But generally speaking, because we only have 380 or 385 properties, those properties are generally occupied on a regular basis. Our function now is not to create more properties that are zoned for commercial, but to actually redevelop the ones that are already there. As you can see, and I'm sure Mark talked about at the last meeting, the philosophy the town had back in the 60s and 70s was to create these hub areas for service purposes to to allow the residents of the town to shop in these areas. At this point in time, all the properties around the commercial districts have now become residential, and then to expand those now would be an impact to the residents and the neighborhoods around them. So that's not the intent of the town. The intent is now to redevelop the older ones, provide better services. The town did a couple of years ago rezone some properties across from Wegmans here at 250 and 441. They did that to accommodate a couple of things. Number one, the houses that were down there were not getting any reasonable return off their value. The property owners have been paying taxes for 30, 40, 50 years and weren't getting enough out of it to make it worth the effort of staying there. Secondly, we were concerned that they were not going to be maintained well, and you can tell some of them aren't right now for one reason or another. The other portion was the fact that we wanted to have some kind of business use there, but nothing that would require retail sales adjacent to the grammar, or the elementary schools there. We've been getting a lot of people asking for tattoo parlors, vape shops, you name it. The intent was to keep this in an office-type setting. That's pretty much occurred. We have dentist office in there. We have credit unions. We have urgent care. So that is kind of happened in that neighborhood, and it's kind of maintained the character and also preserved the integrity by the school there. So that's where we are right now with commercial development.
Obviously, you're working on the Four Corners is always a...
Four Corners is, the Four Corners is basically the heart of the town. It's considered to be the heart of the town. It's got a lot of shortcomings in the sense that the properties are small. We get a lot of people that want to move into the Four Corners for one reason or another. They become kind of successful. They can't expand their operation, and as a result, they either stay there at the level they're at, or they move out and become larger at some other location, either in Penfield or elsewhere. The other issue, too, over the years has been parking, or lack of it. The town, I think, has done a great job over the last 20 years or so in terms of providing parking. We have parking lots both in the northeast quadrant and the southeast quadrant. There's adequate parking now in the northwest quadrant. We were successful in working with the property owners to create through traffic access lanes out behind Dunkin' Donuts in that area to provide better accessibility to those properties without having to cross back and forth along Route 441. And then most recently, the developer and several of his neighbors got together and extended Mott's Lane down to Penfield Road, which has been a big help for a lot of the properties in that area. Some of the restaurants have really flourished since that's occurred, and it's been a much safer situation for people getting out and going on to 5 Mile Line Road and heading east out of that intersection.
Sorry, I just want to show
It's okay.
it in a different form.
We have been requiring, as a condition of site plan approval for all commercial developers, to provide for interconnectivity between property owners or properties so that they can get back from one property to another without having to go back out on the main roads. It's been one of our major principles in terms of redeveloping these areas. It's been working out very well. Town just did purchase that area and redeveloped a parking lot down there as early as this last spring. That's all been resurfaced and
Which are
has provided a great service to the people in that
southeast
neighborhood.
corner of 5 Mile.
Sorry.
21, right by
Just-
Grand View?
Yeah, just north of Grandview, yeah. We're having some issues on the northeast quadrant. There isn't a lot of parking there. The parking that's in the church is actually privately owned by the person who owns that old church. The properties along the frontage here are really challenged in terms of providing adequate parking. A lot of them have not been redeveloped or even properly utilized. One of them has been vacant now for a period of time on the first floor. It's one of the visible ones I was talking about earlier. And that has been a problem in terms of getting access to parking to redevelop it or to provide new uses for it. But you can see interconnectivity along the northwest quadrant there. Coming through here.
So back in the day, the property used to be a restaurant, right?
Which one?
That property you're
these-
referring to used to be
Yes.
the
Yes,
restaurant
it used to
bar.
be- it used to be Oscars.
So where do people used to park
Penfield
there?
Grill.
Where did they use
I think it was either on street or...
Well, it was 35 years ago. There was not a lot of need for, there was some on-street parking back then, actually on both sides of the street. People would cross that street to go over to patronize that restaurant. in this day and age, since we have 36,000 cars a day going through that intersection, not the safest thing to do, especially if you've been in there drinking for a couple of hours. So the town board's been very careful and cautious not to allow uses to go in there that would be detrimental to, public health, safety. And as a result, we have not been getting a lot of people coming in to ask for various uses to go into that property.
Well, the other thing is we've had a few applications that have come in, but we've been trying to convince the landlord to fix the facade of the building too.
Yeah.
And with every attempt to do that, the application then fizzles and dies and disappears, so.
It's not just that building, it's the building next to it. It's those two. Two properties, two properties.
I want to talk about like Penfair.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the plazas. The plazas are kind of going through a transition period in Penfield. Baytown Plaza first. Baytown has actually kind of revitalized itself in the last couple of years. They still have some vacancies, but the vacancies are now starting to fill. They got a ways to go yet, but they are getting there. They're providing new services to the community that weren't there a couple of years ago.
Sorry, I'm gonna do something here. Get you a little more recent. That picture was a little outdated.
That plaza's really boomed over the past couple of years.
It's been a big project for us. Holy speed.
It's a good shot of all the parks, though.
True, very true. There we go.
So where's the property line behind? AMC Webster.
Perfect and pixelated.
So even this is still under construction, as you can see. It's got to be a couple of years old. But the property, I would say now is probably about 90% developed. There are still a couple of outbuildings that are proposed for the site that have not been constructed yet.
Just be right along these areas here.
They are looking to utilize the green space, which was once part of the old Tops Plaza, Tops store there. They're now utilizing that for community events. You'll see them coming in fairly soon to the Zoning Board of Appeals for an approval to allow various things like outdoor theaters and movies at night. They've got all sorts of events. They want to do a farmer's market there. So they've really kind of latched on to try to get the community to come to that site and utilize some of their benefits.
So we've even seen, recently McDonald's has come in for a plan to revamp their outside as well as Key Bank. So it's nice to see with the infusion coming back into that plaza, that even the other businesses now want to kind of upgrade their look to match what the plaza looks like and kind of have a more of a cohesive look. So McDonald's has been in the planning board recently, and I just heard, we just heard Key Bank was
They're
looking
working on plans too, yeah.
doing an outside update on that. Obviously the Beal is gone, that's now up in a Verizon store, and they've got some stuff there, so it's good to see. I don't know what everybody's thoughts are in Super Walmart, and we'll go into that, but that has always the kind of the drive that brings the cars past the front door, but that's unfortunately that's the drive that brings people past the smaller shops and the other things that kind of survive off that and the traffic to that. So now we're kind of that they're established. Thankfully, we're starting to see that plaza come back, because that plaza was kind of
Struggle.
struggling.
It is.
for a while.
It's created a catalyst for redevelopment of other sites that have just kind of been floundering for several years.
Just Empire Boulevard in general there.
One of the biggest problems with this neighborhood, this area, is the fact that it really doesn't have an identity for the town, for either town. Everybody thinks it's in Webster.
Yeah.
It's got a Webster mailing address, it's paying Webster school taxes. It's got a zip code for Webster, so it takes on that identity. We've just approved a sign package for the plaza. They're going to be putting up signs saying Baytown Plaza at Penfield, New York, that type of thing. We asked that to be done, and they're doing it. So we are trying to create that feeling that you're still in Penfield. You're still quite deeply in Penfield. Penfield goes all the way up until Dunkin' Donuts in Webster. That's the first property in Webster, the last one in Penfield.
So we need a movie theater in Penfield, is what you're saying again. We had one growing up. So.
We did. We
I
had a
missed
good
it.
one. So there's a lot of activity taking place up there now.
And a bowling alley. And 2 pub flats, 2 miniature golfs.
Take notes. This is a comprehensive plan
We're
update.
missing all this stuff in Penfield
Take
now,
notes.
especially for a growing community.
Rinky Dink is gone. And
Yep.
We've got a-
It's gone.
Well, but you've
Got
also got
hotels,
things now coming in that you didn't have before, like Wickham Farms. Wickham Farms is providing a lot of services You know, we laugh about the pillow, the jumping pillow. I kind of thought that was crazy when it first came in, but it's almost become iconic now. Every little kid in Penfield's been on that pillow, and I'm sure they'll remember that the rest of their lives. So things do have a tendency to come back in, and I like the way they're doing it because it's more agriculturally oriented. It's bringing people back to nature, and I think that's what they're trying to do, and it's very family oriented. So you do have bits and pieces of that coming back into Penfield in certain locations.
And what's been good about this plaza too is, you know, we saw, again, the redevelopment of Tops. Who would have thought you could have took a Tops, cut it in half, and turn it into viable tenant space. So that was a nice undertaking there by also creating kind of a, they call it their street of shops, where you have the on-street parking, a little more walkable in there. They've done a very good job. It's hard to tell on here, but when you look at, what?
Actually, they did a good job.
Oh, sorry, that was a question.
I want to shift your attention down a little bit to Creek and...
I've got a question about this. What did the town do to encourage this versus how much was just private developer coming in and?
Well, it really was a private developer coming to us saying, hey, we need to do something. They've got an investment there and they're not getting the returns that they want off the investment. They went out and they solicited everybody to
The
come
town
in.
did rezone the area where Super Walmart is now.
We had to do that in order
That was
for it to
zoned
be
single-family residential.
They owned the
So it was-
property.
They owned the property. It was an R115. It was originally part of St. Anne's home, so there was an MR piece. And then there was an R115 piece, which was the connection or extension of Brant Point and Seabury Boulevard. So that was a negotiation with the town board and the applicant to rezone part of that. So it was some back and forth to say, okay, yes, we'll rezone this. You've got to put in buffer areas, but to try to help out the viability of the plaza, they said we need a new anchor to bring people more to the area. So that was kind of a public-private partnership, but at least it was a negotiation with the town board to rezone land, and then work with the planning board to redesign that, and then have it fit together. So.
But they came to us, and generally speaking, developers do that. If they're starting to feel that they're not getting the best return on the property, they will come to you with ideas as to how they think they could best manage the property and provide a better profit for themselves. Sometimes they can do it without having the town board, and one of the boards have to intercede for them in terms of rezoning land. But generally speaking, they're coming to us with ideas as to what they'd like to do. Sometimes those ideas are great, sometimes they don't fit at all with what our codes call for, so you gotta tell them no once in a while. But generally speaking, the four of us right here, we spend a lot of time, as I said to the other group the other night, for every 50 ideas that come in that they want to do something, probably about 5 or 10 of them go through the process because they're just not proper for that zoning. You get a lot of people looking for mini storage warehousing. It's a very desirable use these days.
Right.
It costs almost nothing to put up. There's no maintenance to speak of, and they all want to do it, but there's no zoning in our ordinances right now to allow it other than the general business zone. And these general business zones are either where Wegmans is, or where Baytown Plaza is, or the Wegmans out at 441 and 250. So there aren't that many out there. Panorama Plaza is another one. And they'd like to do it in locations that are either zoned residential or not zoned property for what they want to do. So you're telling people no more than you're telling them yes, basically. While we're in this neighborhood, though, I want to go down because this will be important to you. One of the things that you're going to be charged with doing, it's kind of easy to just say, yeah, we got a plaza, we're not going to do anything with it other than what it is. But there are certain areas in the town of Penfield now that are becoming kind of iffy because of traffic issues and just the way life is in general. One of the areas that we're going to ask you to look at is this area here, Empire Boulevard and Plank Road to Creek Street. They get an awful lot of traffic during peak periods. Some of the properties are currently zoned commercial towards Empire. The rest of them are zoned residential. We would be looking for you, and this is just one of many we'll talk about later on, but this would be one we would have you look at to determine whether or not it should stay as it is or be modified in some way as a recommendation to the town board. You can see the zoning changes in here. And as I say, sometimes you get to a point where a neighborhood may or may not need to change just because of the character and what's happened over the last few years. We didn't look at this back in 2010, and we kind of waited to see what was going to happen to the neighborhood, and now we're getting to a point where we want to look at it and get a recommendation from you one way or the other. But you'll have a few of these in town to look at, and those are going to be the ones you're going to have to kind of wrestle through. Getting back to the plazas, Panorama Plaza was just recently purchased by a group. They've been putting a lot of money into that. I don't know if you've noticed this or not, but they have been putting a lot of money into that property.
Just a
It's
big
being well
facade.
maintained. It's got a good occupancy rate to it. There's a gas station down there, the old Hess gas station, that will be redeveloped soon into another gas station with a small convenience mart with it. They will be in sometime soon. I would hope to get that moving along.
The unfortunate part, and we did broach on that last week, is the floodplains down in Panorama, which
Yes.
Big limiting
is
factor.
a big limiting factor in that
Can
area
you
of
put on
what
the,
can be
the
developed,
bump?
because basically, as we spoke last week, what was built in the 70s, 60s, and 70s would no longer be allowed today. So we've kind of got to live with what's there, but it's very hard to expand that area, very hard to grow or show more fill in a floodplain area. So
I believe
that's
that area was a
gonna be
rocky
some
potato
restrictions
farm, if I'm
on
not
that.
mistaken.
And those are DEC regulations, right?
that's FEMA. That's actually
Oh,
federal.
okay. So,
Yes, that falls under the federal, and as we know, with all these hurricanes and everything else, insurance rates, cost of flood insurance goes up and up and up, so they are very stringent upon flood regulations. We have to, do a lot just on our end on stuff, so anytime somebody wants to redevelop, that's why the one property is set so long, next to ESL Bank across the street, used to be Carriage Corners. One, it's a DEC brownfield cleanup, so they're working with them to clean that up. Two, you can't expand the building, so somebody wants to come in and says, well, I want to go bigger, I want to go taller, I want to do something else. They're in a floodplain, they're held by the box of what they were before. So fortunately, people call us all the time and say, hey, it's ugly, why is it still sitting there? There is stuff going on. They are doing, cleanup for the brownfield first and foremost to make it, a safe place and clean that up. But it is very limited by the floodplain in the area, so it's not just as easy to say, let's just fill it. And, obviously if you fill anywhere, you push the floodwaters, onto somebody else's property, which you can't do, so.
FEMA also holds the town accountable. If we are, and we haven't been, obviously, we're very responsible about it because we recognize anybody who's lived in Penfield for the last 30 or 40 years recognizes the kind of flooding that occurs in that area. It's actually the confluence of Allen Creek and Arundecoy Creek, and you know that 7 hours or 8 hours after a major storm, you're going to get some flooding in the parking lot of that plaza. Luckily, we've not had flooding in the plaza proper itself. I do know that when Jam Fields was in, where that big building is here, at one time, the water went up 7 or 8 feet along that wall, and it was still marked there for many, many years until the property was redeveloped. But if you go down there now, you'll see the town of Penfield's very responsible in ensuring that things like manholes are sitting up much higher than they normally would. You can go down there and see them 6, 7 feet above grade.
Waterproofing
The
buildings.
buildings are all waterproof. The people that operate out of there are constantly working with the fire marshal to ensure that they understand floodproofing procedures. Tops is one of them. They have floodproofing gates that they have to install during flooding conditions to ensure that the building doesn't get flooded. And as I say, if this were not around, if these laws were around 40 years ago, these properties wouldn't have been developed the way they are now. You can see, go ahead.
So I guess that leads to, I think, a fairly obvious question about why a gas station would be allowed to be put in the middle of a
They're
floodplain.
basically only going to be able, the size of that little Hess station's down there
Yeah.
is only going to be the size that it ever is going to be, unless they'd have to buy property that's outside of the floodplain, lower that down to develop something bigger than.
Again, there's
now,
also an
so-
issue of pre-existing non-conformance. I don't know if you talked about that or not last month.
Yeah,
Last
we
week.
did go through some of that, so, yeah, so any of those are gonna be hard to redevelop, and that's why that gas station is sat empty for a while, and probably will for a little while, because it's not, anybody that wants to come in now, pretty much all gas wants a convenience store. You want a convenience with
Or a
a,
drive.
But I think what you're talking
drive-through
about more
with
is
something
how's
else
the
and-
gas impacting the floodplain, that type of thing.
Exactly.
They
yeah.
have to meet standards now. All these tanks that they're installing now are all fiberglass tanks, and
they've
they
gotta
have to be
have,
inspected constantly by the DEC. So
they're weighted down so they don't float up,
Yeah.
so there is ballast on them to make sure the tank, otherwise, they'll be buoyant and pop right out of the ground, but, so DEC would weigh in on that as well as FEMA and everything else, but that is some of the difficulties down in Panorama is redeveloping.
It's a balancing act. We have to balance out the fact that it's a property that has value to it. We want it to have value, obviously, because it's in a commercial zone. It's been there. When the Advanced Auto Group came in and tore down the old restaurant there, they wanted to build something that did not elevate above floodplain regulations. And we said, no, you can't do that. You've got to bring it up. You've also got to do some things in terms of making sure the building is flood-proofed during storm events. So they had to go through a whole regimen of things to do in order to get to where they are. But again, as I said, the town is held responsible in the event that it's not being, it's not following FEMA laws and it's not doing the things it should be doing to mitigate or minimize flooding. FEMA does review our variances periodically to make sure that we're not granting an excessive number of variances for floodplain development. We actually have not been granting any variances for floodplain development in recent years. But again, we have to balance that out. The Advanced Auto Group was a good example of that. Another one that's going to happen fairly, we hope fairly soon, is the building that the Simonetti family tore down up there where the doctor's office was by the racket club. That is also in the floodplain. That was not elevated when it was constructed back in the 60s or 70s. They are now going to have to elevate that building, and they're going to have to provide storage capacity for stormwater and all that business when they come back in. And they're kind of wrestling through that right now to figure out how that can be done. So it's a gigantic balancing act, and you have to make sure you're following federal regulations, you have to make sure you're following town regulations, and
So we actually did get it audited earlier this year, and they went so far as they were looking at aerial photos, they found somebody expanded their septic system in a floodplain area as a raised fill system and brought it to our concern, and we're like, we didn't even issue the permit. It was issued by the Monroe County Health Department because they had a new septic system. So they came to us and said, how'd you issue a fill permit here? And I'm like, I didn't know the guy got a new septic system because it doesn't go through us. So they obviously were poring over aerial photos to see what and where and how and where fill was placed and what was happening. So
FEMA is very stressed now with all the activity taking place around the country with flooding and storm events. They're looking at every way possible to mitigate and minimize wherever they can. It's just going to cost more and more.
well, they're also looking to, unfortunately, pull more people into the insurance plans
That's
to help
right.
pay for it all. So
Yeah.
you know,
gotta
they're
pay.
looking to see who's out there and in these areas, and unfortunately, insurance rates are going to keep going up. So we've got to keep on top of it. So one, we don't make it worse, or two, allow new development in flooded areas or flood potential areas.
The last plaza that I want to just talk about really quickly is Penfair Plaza. Penfair is probably one of our oldest plazas. I believe that Eastway, actually, when it was built, and also Panorama, were the oldest. They were built in 1959, 1960. Penfair, I think, was a 1970s plaza. It's off the road quite a ways.
250, 441.
It doesn't have a lot of visibility. There's some outbuildings now. The outbuildings are actually, I think, more successful in many respects than the actual main plaza. Much of that main plaza right now is vacant. This area here is vacant. They have some little shops in here that don't have a lot of visibility. We provided a lot of signage out there to give them visibility from the public. But that's one of the plazas right now that we're concerned about in terms of getting that back online and getting it to where it could be for the town.
I see that was an older developer who held on to it for years and years. I
Passed
think
away.
He just passed, so I think his kids are figuring out what to do with it or what's going to happen with it, but we're hopeful that they'll reinvest some money into it and get that plaza back. And
So what can the town do to encourage it? I mean, if you're looking at I wanted to say Webster, it's not Webster. The Walmart Plaza is a great example of revitalization but it was pretty much reactionary from the town standpoint, right?
I mean, a lot of it is.
What can we do to help?
Well,
spur
I
that?
suspect they'll be coming to us soon. They'll probably want to do some things with this plaza to make it more marketable. Somebody might want to buy the property and do something else with it totally different than what it is right now. The key, though, is there are incentives. The town does have incentives. There's something called a 485B exemption, which is a state exemption. So if you put a certain amount of money back into the property, you get tax credits for a period of time, 10 years, so that you're not being penalized for making the property nicer. There are other things that we work with. We do a lot of work with the County Monroe Economic Development Group. They are very active now. They've been doing a lot in Penfield for various businesses, the K2 Brewery, for instance.
Comida.
That was a big recipient of...
Comida.
It's the old Comida. They don't like to be referred to as Comida anymore. They had a negative connotation. It's, I think it's Reimagined Rochester or something like that. But they've been very active. They're doing a great job. And they've done a lot of work in Penfield. I think they're responsible for a lot of what happened at Baytown. They're responsible for the South Point area down there at Water's Edge. K2 Brewery, they do a lot of work in Penfield, so we've been the recipients of their activities. But there are things out there, but generally speaking, it has to come from the developer, right? Unless the property's gone into such a state of disrepair, I know the town board's always watching for that. If it goes into such a state of disrepair that things have to be done, we have to go knock on their door. And there's a couple of those out there right now that we're dealing with. It's not always easy because a lot of these properties go into bankruptcy. And you've got banks that are in Wisconsin, California, Washington State. You're wrestling with trying to get them to do something. And generally speaking, a foreclosure process takes about 1,100 days to resolve in New York State. So it's not the easiest thing in the world to deal with. We have a lot of houses out there we want to get cleaned up, but they're all in foreclosure and they're going through bankruptcy, and it's a real pain. So that's kind of where we are with the commercial aspect.
Another piece, the shit's switching gears drastically now. We're going to talk briefly about preservation of agriculture. I want to pull up it's the county's map. I gotta find it for a second here. Where did I put it?
While he's doing that, I just want to put a plug in for the Penfield Chamber. They've been really active over the last several years in terms of trying to network their people and get them assistance and giving them programs as to how to run a business well, and trying to get them to help brand and that type of thing, their properties and their businesses, so they can do a better job out there in the public eye. But they've been a good partner of the town of Penfield over the last several years, and we work with them on a weekly basis to try and get things resolved for commercial operators.
And before I jump into this, I want to tack on to your question earlier about what can the town do. And again, like you said, it is reactionary, but options that developers do have sometimes is looking at, rezoning options. Mixed use is always an option now that we have it. But since that's GB, it kind of gives your max intensity there. But, you look at a plaza like that, and because GB is pretty flexible in terms of the uses there, if it were to go through some redevelopment, which is similar to Baytown, where you're doing significant building modifications, removal, demolition, or whatever it might be, they do have opportunities there. I mean, we have a lot of problems that we see today with a lot of the older plazas is this sea of parking that you don't need. Asphalt costs money, it costs money to maintain it, it costs money to plow it, pave it, all those things. So wherever possible, we do look to work with developers on how can we, make that one of the site improvements to enhance the walkability, the green space that's there. It helps with stormwater management as well to reduce all that impervious surface. So whenever redevelopment does take place, we do want to work with them closely so that it becomes the best possible project. And like you said, it is reactionary, but I think we have a very good track record of working with developers to make it a win-win situation for everybody.
There's a lot of pressure on these properties now because of Amazon and several other operations now that are competing with them. I'm surprised that we're as strong as we really are considering what they're having to deal with. The other thing we're worried about early on was the fact that because of computer use, you can do a lot of the stuff in your living room now. You don't necessarily need an office, but I will say, even now, we still have a very high occupancy rating for our office space in Penfield, to the point where people are still interested in building additional office space, which surprises me, but they're looking for corporate headquarters, that type of thing, and it's still very strong, so we're really happy about that as well.
Jim, how about medical office?
Medical is the most desirable and in demand of all the uses that we have.
Linden Oaks.
Yeah, the U of R has been a big catalyst here. We've had 3 or 4 office buildings built with them just in the last 5 years.
Urgent care facilities.
We got the Baytown Plaza.
Baytown's a new piece. The coexistence with the YMCA over on 250. So we got medical.
Primary care.
Yeah.
Yeah, they built the orthopedic rehab center over there on 250. So they've been very busy in Penfield.
You see a lot of dentists and orthodontists and
You better have the nicest teeth in all the county, but the amount of dentists we have here.
A lot of them are reaching the point where they want to have their own practice with their own land and their own office. They don't want to lease anymore. So as Jim was saying earlier, that B&R district offered them a great opportunity to find a small piece of land, redevelop it to the size that they need for their patients. Their patients follow them, so they have a very good idea of what they require. And it's been good to work with them and redevelop those properties and clean up some of those curb cuts on 441 to help improve traffic there and kind of get some of those traffic obstacles out of the way. So we continue to work towards that as well. Not a lot of hospitals there, don't worry.
No.
Even though they're permitted in residential,
We went through that last week.
Yeah. Churches
it
and
may not be
hospitals.
much longer.
It's one thing we should.
All right, so now switching gears, going towards preservation of agriculture. Penfield has a deep history of this, but to give you a quick picture of it, this is the Monroe County Ag District map, and it shows you one thing: what properties fall under New York State Ag Districts, and a lot of it is East Penfield. You know, it's rural agricultural uses, and they're great uses to have out there. So they're identified there, and going back to Penfield's history with this, I don't know if anyone's had a chance to look at our open space plans that we've adopted over the years. The first one was in 2001, and it was done after, well, in the process of securing some funding, some grant money that allowed us to purchase development rights on property with conservation easements, or outright purchase the land in general. There's a lot of
Also, along with the 2002 bond that the town itself voted for a $10 million bond to go out and purchase properties with it. So some was
right.
grant money, and then others obviously was the commitment of the town to preserve these open space areas and preserve ag lands, and wanted to see that remain.
Yeah, so the town went through a series of acquisitions for both purchase development rights and town-owned land to preserve agriculture, preserve its nature and its use for the longevity of the property. Basically, that bond money that was secured went to the property owners. You know, we paid them for those development rights. It's like buying the property, but not buying the property. They still own it, but there's an easement on it that is an agreement between that owner and the property, between the owner and the town, and it's a partnership, is what that document creates about preserving agriculture there. And as we know, agriculture has continued to evolve what it encompasses. It's a lot more than farming now. There's agri-tainment, there's ag education, there's ag tourism is obviously huge for the New York State area. So yeah, agriculture has evolved, and these conservation easements can help us continue to preserve that as well.
The ag district, though, you can get out of the ag district. A lot of times what's happening is properties that were in the ag district and owned by a farmer, the developer comes along, wants to buy the land, develop it. There are penalties for doing this. I think the ag district goes for about 8 years, and then you can re-opt or you can get out if you want. But if you sell that land within that 8-year period, there are penalties for doing that you have to pay back. So developers are willing to do that in some cases, and as a result, you do lose that land out of the ag district. But a lot of farmers are banking on that to be their retirement when the time comes. So as a result, it does happen.
One of the things we should highlight, and I'm sure people have followed, we've had some, say, controversial applications, but us purchasing the development rights of some property doesn't mean that nothing can happen with the property on it. Basically purchased, and the town did it back in 2002, we bought the development rights of having it further subdivided, created into single-family homes. They can still operate as agricultural properties. New York State has been very, I say liberal or very...
Open to.
Yeah, open and aggressive, which is wonderful, to making agricultural properties valuable, which includes many different, I mean, we've got, Bellman's, and you've got Shoots, and you've got others that have grown, and some of it is, you've got hard cider now, and you've got some things, breweries and other things, which has gotten a little controversial, but New York State has been very supportive of agricultural and letting them gain value from the property. So even though we own the development rights to the property, it's not split off and made into single-family houses, but there's still some development out there. There's still opportunity for those properties to still garner an income off of it, still operate as agricultural property. Just what we think of traditional farming may not be traditional farming anymore, and agricultural comes in many different ways, whether it's corn mazes or whether it's apple cider, or whether it's, you know, different things, so.
There always has to be an agricultural component with these properties, as they have these other uses on there. So you'll always see farming as a part of that activity on those properties.
You have to demonstrate every year that you're generating enough income to warrant keeping the exemptions that you have. If you're I think if you have a 5-acre parcel and you're supposedly in the district, you're supposed to generate about $50,000 worth of income per year to demonstrate that you can keep that. That's for our ag exemption, and that's one of the exemptions we talked about for encouraging business. That's the farmers get that exemption if they can demonstrate that they can comply with those requirements.
Riding academies and stables too?
Oh, you know, Roland, that's a good question. I don't know. I think that they may very well be, just because of the agricultural component, if they can generate that kind of income and demonstrate to the assessor's office that they've done it. Yeah, I think very.
I don't think that counts as agriculture.
I don't know. I thought at one time it did. I'm not sure if it still does.
So, yeah, so back to open space acquisition, some properties we out and out acquired, the town now owns. Others we purchased development rights, so they're still in private ownership, but still operate as agricultural and remain that way. But I know that's been a little bit of a misnomer on some of the stuff, or, you know, that we bought those, and people are saying, how is anything being developed on there? How is stuff still happening on these properties? But the intent was to keep them agricultural. Agricultural may just not be, you know, a farmer in the field planting corn every day. It, you know, it comes in all forms. And
They're very
shapes
thorough
and
documents, these easements. They list out farm operations, farm area. They go through a bunch of different uses and activities on the property that are permitted on there. So, I mean, the property owners have done a great job up until, you know, throughout time, keeping it compliant with those agreed terms. So it has, in most cases, it's turned out to be a good thing.
But, and it's continued education for us. I mean, farmers can operate at 4 in the morning and bring in the crops if they need to, or fertilize a field. And so there's angst between new residents that want to move out to the country for quiet, easy living, and farmers are doing what farmers do and have been. So we have ag data statements that, you know, new developments need to sign that they understand I'm moving into an agricultural area, and if you got to bring in the crops, you bring in the crops. It doesn't matter what time of day and if the weather's got to happen. So again, as staff, that's something we need to educate new people moving to the country that, you know, should be quiet, nothing ever happens, and, you know, educate
People are
them on
active.
what
They like
They
the
have to
country,
be.
but they don't like the smell of cows.
So
It's a problem.
can the town buy agricultural rights and keep them as agriculture, as opposed to the cider mills and the hard cider stuff? Who makes that determination of what's an agricultural
The
use?
State Farm Bureau in many cases does that.
falls under New York State Ag and Markets
But if
law.
you purchase, the town itself as an entity is purchasing those rights, can't they determine?
If we did, yeah. I mean,
We could just buy the land outright if that were the case.
But you could buy development rights and limit what you can see for the.
under that easement, yes. I mean, right now, basically,
But you're writing the easement, so you can write.
But the state's giving us the money to buy the easement.
Okay.
That's the issue.
Yeah,
We're
there
not
was
just
a
gonna-
bond that we got the money for back then.
and most of them said, basically, the hinge term is allowed under Ag and Markets law based in New York State. So as that law grows, and last year, we all kept seeing emails or things every day with Cuomo saying, you know, agricultural is going to allow, you know, beer now and some of the other stuff. So as those things are growing in the Ag and Markets law, that kind of still falls under the easement that we have. So as the easements are listed today and what they were bought for, obviously property owners have their right, and basically says if it falls under the Ag and Markets law.
But if there was future easements,
I mean, if the town residents said we want to buy property agricultural and it can only be used for planting corn, and that was the easement we negotiated with that particular farmer, yes, we could. It'd have to be in that language specifically to that.
right.
But that would be a very narrow ban, you know,
Right.
explicitly to that. I don't know which
I don't think it's-
landowner would sell, you know, on that very thin line that basically wouldn't allow them any flexibility in the future. Basically, all they could do that is that forever, and once they're done with that, the land would just, you know, sit vacant.
I don't think Ag and Markets would give us the money to buy the
No, but I'm saying if the residents, you know, if we want to do a bond by the whole town, and
Oh, yeah,
it
if we
was
wanna do a
just
bond.
But
straight
if
from
your
the
goal
residents,
is
you
to keep land
could.
in agriculture, that would seem like that would be one of the ways.
Well, again, remember what we showed you earlier.
I
you
don't
see
see,
on
I
this
don't see a
map-
bounce house and a
Well,
zip line and being.
but the problem that you're running into is farmers these days can't necessarily make a go of it with just corn, or just beans.
There's farmers that are making more than a go on it.
Well, they own a lot of land, or they're leasing a lot of land
Right.
to do it, but just to have a piece of property out there, to have one small family trying to make a go of it with just corn or something like that, it's not gonna make it. But again, the thing that drives the process really is the fact that there's no sanitary sewers there. And with no sanitary sewers, there's no development to speak of. I mean, you could build on a 2-acre lot out there, or a 5-acre or 10-acre, but you're not gonna get a housing tract out there, and you're not getting pressure from developers to do anything.
I thought this committee is what was driving the process. Right, I mean,
Driving which portion?
agriculture. Well,
Well, it's
the comprehensive plan for everything.
it's a component of it.
Right.
I mean, it's a component of it to realize that agriculture is out there and to respect it, and that preservation of agriculture continues to be important in the town. But trying to secure more money for, say, more purchase development rights, that's a tough call right there. I mean, that was a one-time thing so far that's happened. That was the first time it happened in Penfield in 2002 when we got that money.
We're still
We
paying
haven't
that
gotten
bond
anything
now.
since, and we're still paying off that bond in many cases.
4 more years, I think. We're at 18 now? Or is it 18?
2025, I thought, or something?
I thought it was a 20-year bond.
I thought it was 2022.
2022?
We can check.
That's why I said I think it's 4 years.
But I know there's, I didn't have a chance to check with Barbara today, but I know we're still paying on that initial purchase bond with that.
Yep. So did that answer your question? I don't
I don't know if
want
it's
to
a
cut anyone off,
question.
but
It just seems like there's the agriculture, the land available for agriculture is diminishing. I mean, you're putting in that 100 acres and,
Well, and the farmers are
mixed-use
diminishing
thing,
too. That's the other problem.
what's that?
The farmers are diminishing as well.
Right.
That's the
Yeah.
thing. This whole town at one time was a farm,
Right.
and now we're down to what you're seeing here.
here's a perfect example is, and this is on the west side of town. It's the Windsor Ridge subdivision. Now Bauman owned that, well, not owned. He leased that land to farm it for many years. Right, it's at the corner of Atlantic and 5 Mile. We got 86 homes that are being installed, that are being constructed there, and for the longest time, people thought that would be agriculture forever. Well, what people didn't realize is that was actually zoned R115, which was at the time our densest zoning allowed for 15,000 square foot lots. Everyone was lucky enough, and he was fortunate enough to continue to lease that land from Dolomite and farm it for many, many years. And he actually got up in the public hearing during that presentation and said, folks, I can't afford to keep this land anymore. There's too much value in it, and I'm not the one who's going to be to develop it. So I've been lucky and fortunate to farm it for as many years as I could. But, there's other uses for this land. But that's an example on the
I
west
agree,
side.
but then how do you does the town think about how you replace that land? For
Well, I
farming?
think the town was pretty proactive in 2002 to spend $10 million on preserving land, especially in East Penfield. Right now, there's not a lot of pressure for development in East Penfield because of the lack of sanitary sewers. That could change over the next 20 or 30 years. And now we've got lands out there that we know are going to be preserved for agricultural and open space purposes.
I think that's also part of the mission of this committee too, isn't it?
And the zoning, yeah, the zoning right now is 2 acres. And I don't know if you talked about the history of the zoning, but back in the 1970s, septic systems, people were on half-acre lots and septic systems with them, and they were all failing. Everybody's backyard turned into one gigantic leach field, which failed, and so they had to put people on sanitary sewers. The town recognizing that they couldn't do that throughout the entire community, with the amount of money it had to put people on sewers, rezone the lands to 1 and 2 acres, recognizing that they needed area for expansion on their septic systems if they were going to develop out there. And several people have. I mean, there's a lot of houses out in East Penfield. It's just they're in an agricultural type setting, a rural type setting, and they don't have tract housing out there. And it is, as Rob said, they're not going to because of the current zoning. And who knows if that'll ever change. There's no ability for us to tie into Wayne County for sanitary. Right now, there's very little ability for us to tie into Webster, and there's no ability to tie into Parrington. So there's not a lot of pressure for any kind of development out in East Penfield at this point in time. Not to say that it couldn't change, it's just, that's the way it's been now for several years.
And also, we don't want to restrict what someone can do with their land to a degree where you have just the one thing. I mean, the residential zoning district offers a number of things in it, which people don't realize. But the, huh? Yeah, see? Who realizes it? Not many people. I mean, you don't tell them.
Cemetery.
But
Schools.
The hospital, cemetery, school.
schools, hospitals, you got parks. I mean, there's a lot of things
And those
out
are the kind
there.
of things you have to look at as a group.
Sure, I think you're missing.
Yeah, I think we need to, part of this process, we'll be looking at the demand for farming. And so there's more to that than just, well, we would like to keep this agricultural in this very narrow bandwidth.
Yeah.
Again, you can't limit the owners of that land to be able to make a living on it, so you need some flexibility. And we need to understand as a group, what is the desire for farming in our community, and then align to that. At least that's how I look at it, versus not what we would like to have. I think it has to be what's the reality of
That's
the
economically
market.
viable.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's all supply and demand. It's economics of it.
Every time you go to Edmonds, you make a decision, you need to have farming.
I'm not negating the fact that we need farming, but I'm contesting the fact that we needed it right there, let's say in East Penfield where that property development was. Just like the farmer said, it wasn't economically viable for him to maintain that property as a farm development.
There's a lot that goes into it.
The key also is making sure you're not taking away the value or property rights of an individual who has land. Right? That's an ongoing battle, and you gotta be very careful about that.
Want to talk about historic?
Yeah, you got the map?
I got all kinds.
So one of the things Penfield's noted for is it's,
I know. I like that. All right.
it has been very strong in the world of historic preservation, more so than a lot of communities. We've gotten a lot of accolades for it over the last years.
Or the district?
The district first.
Okay, district first.
This started back in the early 70s, late 60s, when several people in town started to recognize the need to preserve Penfield's past. There were a lot of great buildings a lot of homes constructed back in the 1820s, 30s, 40s, 50s, even in the 90s. And you can see here's a list of a lot of the homes that have been given a designation, whether it be a national, state, or local designation. There are also some districts we created. We've created 3 districts. The first district was the Daisy Flour Mill District, and I want to just talk about that for a minute. That was built in 1848, and back in 1972, the Town Board and the Historic Preservation Board saw the value in creating a district there to preserve the Daisy Flour Mill. They did create that district. It's a 6-acre parcel with the 3 houses on it and the actual mill itself. It went through a long process after that as to how to use it. There were several people that were interested in doing things with it. And it finally, back in the 1979, 1980, it became a restaurant that you all remember as the Daisy Flour Mill. It's since been kind of morphed into a catering operation. Catering operation is going to close soon. We have met with the individuals that want to buy the property. They would like to put it back into a restaurant use and also a microbrew as well. So they'll be coming to the town board, I would think, in a few months or so. They're going through the process of financing and closing, and all that business is subject to getting their approvals. And one of the things you need to know about these historic sites is that it's in a residential zoning district, it's in an R120 zone, just like a tract housing zone. But because it's a designated property, the town board under our code has the ability to change the use to something that it deems to be appropriate as it relates to the scale and character of the neighborhood in which it's located. So back in the 1979, 1980 era, the town board issued a special permit to allow it to become a restaurant rather than an abandoned mill. And the same thing is true for the Clark House. We talk a lot about, Clark House and Shadow Pines. The town board issued a special permit back in 1984 for the Clark House to become the clubhouse for the Shadow Pines Country Club. And it has that ability. They've done it in several locations. It's worked out really well because they are careful about what they do and what they approve. Another one is the Strawberry Castle on Penfield Road by Woodside Drive. You all know that property. That was owned by a gentleman and his wife. They are financial planners, and they needed somebody to come in and work with them on a daily basis to help them with their books and whatever. The town board did issue them a special permit to allow that person to come in and work on the site. It hasn't created any impact on the neighborhood, and it helped preserve the property because it gave the owners the ability to work on site and put money back into the homes. And that's the whole key. You've got these beautiful old homes that a lot of people want to take care of, but can't, and as a result either have to kind of let them go a little bit or sell them to somebody who can. This is kind of a tool that the town uses now to allow them to get some return on the property so they can put money back into the residences, and I think they've done a great job. We're very lucky that the people that own these homes in Penfield have taken good care of them. The second district is this one here, this linear district along 5 Mile Line Road that was created in the early 80s, late 70s. They took 500 feet in from the center line of the road and went back and created the district. The people that are in that district, if they make exterior changes only to the properties, the same true of the Daisy Flour Mill, the Historic Preservation Board only is concerned with exterior changes. They can do what they need to do inside, but any exterior modifications other than normal maintenance, that kind of thing, has to come to the board for review. If you want to paint your house a different color than what it is now, they do review the color schemes for the house to make sure that purple and orange aren't the colors of the day. But I will say, they do a great job with the public. I've had many compliments from the people who live in the district about the fact that the board has helped them actually save money in certain respects, and it's worked out really well. And when you drive down 5 Mile Line Road, I think you see the difference. I mean, the properties are well maintained and everybody does a great job of complying with the requirements of the district. Then the newest district is this one right here, just east of the fire hall as you get up towards Peachtree Drive, or Peachtree Road. There were, I think, 6 or 7 units, the Strawberry Castle being one of them, but there were 5 other properties in there as well. They have all become members of the district. They're all locally designated landmarks, and they are all being maintained by the property owners as best they can at this point in time. So I think it's worked out really well. We do, if you have a house, for instance, these homes here, they are still subject to the town board review or the Historic Preservation Board review for any exterior modifications. Things such as, you know, if your house is white and you're painting it white again, they don't need to come back to us for any reason. But if you're going to make major modifications to the house, or even fencing, or anything that would alter the character of the home, they have to come back in for a review with the board. It generally takes the same night that you come in. It's not dragged out for any long period of time. Any questions? Okay.
What do we got next here? All right, so the last thing we have for tonight is to kind of take a high-level look at the existing comp plan, kind of review the categories that were discussed, and you know, at length in the document in the last one. And you know, we already talked about at our first meeting that topics like sustainability and community wellness might be some future topics to consider for this group to add into what exists now. And those are shown. You can kind of, if you look at just the table of contents in the document, you know, they're listed out there. And I guess at a high level view, again, I'm just starting there. We have, I'll just jump into the document so you guys have something to look at. This ought to be interesting. So here on page 3 is our table of contents, and right down here, I'll zoom in so you don't need a telescope to see it. We have those topics that I mentioned before. These were topics that the former committee reviewed, discussed, implemented strategies on how to address these topics within the town from 2010 to now. And those are all gone over at length in the document. And I guess I know we've had a few weeks now since you've had the document, and I just want to open up to the committee if there are any questions about what you've reviewed in the document so far, that we can help answer as we get started, kind of reviewing the document now.
And is there anything you'd like to add that's not in here now that you've been thinking about as you've been reading the document?
I think we're gonna go through section by section. That'll be your next few meetings, is to go into actual, let's talk about residential living and get into that section and go through it and some of the recommendations and, short-term, long-term, where have we gone, what have we done, what do we see in the future? So tonight's just kind of a high level, here's kind of some of the categories we were looking at, here's some of the future stuff we were thinking about, what does the group think? Do these seem like viable categories? And then the next meeting, maybe we'll take 2 or 3 and kind of go into each one and start working through those, so we can kind of at least get that working around in our head as, as we're looking at these different areas and
What needs to be updated.
what needs to be updated, where have we come, stuff we're still working on, if the vision played out as what we thought, so.
In the Four Corners district, would a mixed use such as like upstairs apartments be allowed?
They're permitted, yes. The Four Corners actually is a mixed-use district, and that's exactly what they were looking for when they tried for that.
It's not labeled as such, but in practice it is.
That's one of the-
way to encourage it.
We encourage it because obviously if you have more people living there, you have the need for the services become more viable and varied, so.
And it is more traditional,
Yep.
anyways,
Certainly more traditional,
More of a village
that type of product there.
as it was.
Right.
Do you have a question, George?
Well, it's just bringing up the point, I mean, I know it's a zone, but maybe mixed use in a broader term, and maybe another term would be a category there, because it's such an integral part of kind of move forward and the changes we've been talking about, so.
Now that it's implemented and
Now
available.
that it's implemented, yet, is there some other term that we would use to put it underneath that community vision?
Because it is a hybrid, it's not quite residential living and it's not quite commercial.
Maybe that term, hybrid,
And that's kind of bringing in some of that wellness as well as, walkability, bikeability, live work community kind of stuff with it. So that's some of what we were thinking of under the, kind of a wellness component. It seems to be a trend towards that people want to,
yeah, like that wellness,
Well, the YMCA is the anchor of the area. That's the reason why it kind of occurred, because the YMCA did change the character of that neighborhood. But it is based on wellness and it's based on sustainability as well. So that could be a good tack to take on that. Yeah.
The 2010 plan references some other plans, the 2007 Parks and Recreation Master Plan, the 2008 Economic Development Action Plan, the 2008 Bicycle Facilities Master Plan, and so forth. Are those plans available to us to look at?
Yep, we can put those up and
They're on the
actually,
website.
They are on the
They
they're
are.
scattered
Yeah, I
on the
found them on the
website within
website,
the
yeah.
departments.
All right.
There's also like a plans and studies page that has the majority of those, but we'll put those all in Google
Yeah.
Drive and make those available within a reference folder for you.
Great.
actually,
Thank you.
currently, right now, the rec master plan, the rec group is doing an update to their master plan. So we're
Okay.
hopeful they're working through that now, and hopefully towards the end of the year, beginning of next, hopefully they'll kind of wrap their piece, and then hopefully that information will be available to this group. Part of that, and that also kind of segues into the Shadow Pines Committee, which meets on the opposite Tuesday. They've done a questionnaire on what's the public's thoughts, demands for new recreation, what do we see for future uses,
Programs,
demands,
facilities.
programming, facilities type stuff. So hopefully through their survey and information, that'll, one, come back into the Shadow Pines group as well as, share back with this group here. So as you're looking at, future expansion, I mean, they're talking about new lodge demand, needs for lodges and ball fields and community center and courts and, go ahead.
Oh, as a Penfield resident and a parent, when are we gonna get a new community center? Is that part of the discussion too?
I'm not on the rec plan, but
Holy cow.
I would believe that's gonna be part of the discussion. That is something we broached with the Shadow Pines group. That's something, we asked them, now that the town has bought 212 acres over in Shadow Pines, that's something that committee should consider is.
Huge conversation that needs to be had, because Webster has an amazing rec center, Parrington has an amazing rec center, and then we have Penfield, who's an amazing community, which has a horrible rec center.
And
No insult to anyone who
the
works-
recreation department, they're bursting at the seams. I mean, they're turning people away that they do the best they can. They leverage use at the YMCA, they leverage use from the school district. They use fields around there, but as we showed the other day on our map, if you pull up our community center, it looks like there's a lot around it. It's a landlocked parcel that basically is an old school from the 50s that we don't own any of the property around it. It's just the building with courts in the back. We've got the library in part of it and recreation as well as senior in the front. So
Not there yet.
I would assume that's going to be a big recommendation coming out of the
That's
rec-
what we own.
master plan, but we own that little box is the piece that we own. The ball fields around it are the school districts. So it looks like we've got more recreational space around it, but really none of that is.
And half the
town
parking
owned.
is an extension of the high school.
So
Yeah,
is that
that's
part
where
of the talks that we're gonna talk about in the planning committee, or is that part of talks that,
I mean, I think it'll come from the rec master plan, hopefully a recommendation from them, and then I think as this group, it could be, obviously it's a recommendation that, the town
Yeah, you
needs a
can,
new
you
community
can,
center.
you can
I'd like to
support
see
things
some-
that
that
are,
would definitely be my recommendation.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, the time frame for both the master of the parks and for Shadow Pines are going to be done before this.
Yeah.
oh yeah.
So
I would
you're
like to
gonna
see some
have all the
cross-pollination. I
recommendations,
think
the public input,
It's critical if we're going to be
all that
making
information for
recommendations
you
to
guys,
have that
because
input.
this
Yeah.
is something that will fall under
And that's some of the
your purview, yes.
It
Some of
really
the
is
timing is
for
hopefully they
Penfield's
kind of
growth.
complete their stuff and then can provide that data that they've collected
we
and the
want you to
surveys
see
that
what
they've done
they
that
generate.
can feed into this group here, and then that can be a recommendation of the comp plan.
I'd like to see actually a structured presentation of the output to us. I mean, so that we understand at least a little bit the thought process, how they got to their recommendations to tie in what we would recommend.
Yeah, but it'd be a good idea to bring Chris in and let him talk to the group about what came out of that recommendation and how it
Yeah,
got there.
that's just part of it. We'll have him in as a guest to share where
I've
they're
wondered
at.
those
And
two
not just that,
committees
I
have
mean, the entire
Yeah,
program, whatever it is they come up with.
Yeah.
is a recommendation.
I spoke with Chris. I told him that I was on this committee and that I'd be harassing him. He said,
We're
I
gonna be
would,
harassing him as well.
I would love to come.
He's on our
No,
shadow.
No, I think it's good that not only we talk about the community center, but I mean the entire philosophy, what they come up with for recreational needs for the community over the next several years. I think you need to know how they got to where they got to and what the thought processes were for that, so.
When does that process get done, do you know?
Pardon?
Do you know when that process
I
gets
don't,
done?
they're still in the early phase, they just finished their survey.
No, they're actually,
But they're moving along, and I think, we can have Chris come in as soon as they get the results from the survey to see what we can share with you.
But we'd have those results before we gotta decide anything, right?
oh yeah, we want it to be a resource for
We need to
you.
have that, so.
We want it to be a resource for you as a new document is created for the comprehensive plan. It'll be referenced, just like everything else I was scrolling through under plans and studies, that we have a completed rec master plan update as one of your plans and studies you can reference for this. So it's a key component, we all think.
Just a quick clarifying question. When Rothfuss Park was built, it was my understanding that that was built with the intention of a community center being a
Well,
component
there
of
was a
that park
concept,
in the
you're right,
future.
there was a concept plan that showed the possibility that could occur. That might be the right place for it, this area might be the right place for it, being on this campus. Shadow Pines might be the right, we don't know that yet, and I think that's what we're looking for from the rec master plan committee to see what they come up with as a final recommendation.
At least come out from what are they thinking of demands? I mean, are they thinking, indoor turf field? Are they thinking,
That'd be awesome.
senior center? Are they talking courts? I mean, that's what we're looking, what do they want in size and scale, and what's their thought and scope? And then
How do
obviously
you-
we can look at, what property that
How
the
to
town
apply
owns,
that.
what accommodates
And then what do you
that.
do with the existing community center? Does that just become a library and courts, or, we don't know that yet.
Have you thought about this much?
I have a son who plays 2 different Penfield Sports, and we don't have anything in this community. It sucks. Our rec programs are deplorable at best. We participate in Parrington's rec programs for swimming, for outdoor activities. He plays Penfield soccer for Rangers. He plays Penfield Little League. We don't even have a spot to practice in Penfield. We rent facilities in Henrietta and Brighton Sports Zone and TSC, down on 441 for soccer. We don't have anything in Penfield, and that's really sad as a community, especially of our size and scope, where we're growing, where our schools, our elementary schools, are busting at the seams, literally. where we need expansions for all our elementary schools because our classrooms are getting too packed. We need something like this though for Penfield.
That's why we're here talking.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that's why Mark brought it up. Wellness is a component of what I think we need to have in this town going forward. It wasn't really drawn out too much in previous plans, and I think it's definitely in people's minds these days, especially younger families and what opportunities are there as a family. You know, as we have newer developments that have less land, they have smaller backyards, or they turn their backyard into a glorified monster pool for some reason. You know, and they take away all that, their backyard.
Sure.
They're looking for places to go and how to get there and how to best use it. So I think it's definitely important to think about that. I'm a coach and an athlete my entire life, so I can completely respect that. I travel all over the county to have a place to practice.
Sure.
So it's I completely understand it. Where else?
So-
Where did we just leave off? No idea.
Rothfuss Park, there is a part of that section for like a community center type thing. I know my grandfather wanted.
We have a plan floating around out there. I haven't looked at it in years, but there was a concept plan early on when we were looking to.
Didn't he try to
purchase
put? I think my grandfather tried to put. He wanted a senior center, so it must have been.
That's the other thing.
That was the place that.
See, I mean,
Wanted a little bit of everything, didn't he?
He just wanted to go like hang out on his farm. That's all he wanted. He just wanted to go back to his heritage, go back to the farm.
Nothing wrong with that.
Can't blame him.
You know.
well, that's why it's going to be important to see what comes out of that recommendation from Parks and Rec advisor.
And not only recreation, I mean, we've got to provide you guys with information. I mean, the town's growing all over. That
Yeah.
includes DPW facilities, that includes school district. We talked about that last week. The school district's looking at, they're buying properties.
And ambulance space.
Yeah, I mean, you got fire needs, you got sewer demands, you've got, you know, recreation space, you've got library, courts, you know, there's gonna be a lot of demands from a lot of things as this town continues to grow, to look to the future and provide services for the residents that live here and wanna, you know, remain here. So we'll have to provide you guys with a lot of that information on the rec
So will
parks.
like the fire representation and emergency services, those will be individuals that will be doing presentations for us about current capabilities? and-
We'll reach out to them and ask them if, you know, whether they decide to show up or not, but,
I can tell you from a standpoint, from Penfield ambulance standpoint at least, that we have become an ALS agency within the past year. Our call volumes increased exponentially, and that the physical location on Jackson Road for the ambulance base isn't really the center of town, and most of our call volume is towards the east and towards where the populated sections are. So we were in conversation with the town, I believe, to look at utilizing one of their old buildings to house a secondary, you know, location for ambulances. Obviously, so we can have better call response time to residents of Penfield. There's been a lot of discussion about that from an emergency medical standpoint. But there's cost involved.
there's cost involved in all of this stuff. I mean, it's, obviously we don't have unlimited funds, but that's what a comp plan looks forward to, is let's lay out a vision, and then as funding comes available and opportunities come available, at least, you know, the vision and the thoughts there, and, you know, it kind of lays it out. But the supervisor meets with the school district and the superintendent, you know, bi-monthly, and talk about what their needs and wants are and everything else, so.
That's also part of the SEQUER process for this, is going out to other agencies that, you know, are involved in this town, such as the ambulance corps, volunteer fire, school districts, and getting their input about, you know, what the old document was and what the new document will be. So there's a SEQUER component to this that involves collecting and gathering comments, giving them a period of time to provide those too. So not only can we ask for them to come in and talk, but they will also be involved with the making of the document too, just so that we can kind of collect and analyze their thoughts too.
And even if they don't come in, we'll certainly seek input from them as to what their wish list would be, or what their needs are over the next 10 years.
I mean, even beyond that, I mean, we as a town meet with RG&E annually, you know, talking to them about where they're running out of gas service. You've seen them running new gas mains all over town, where they're running out of electricity. We talked with the Water Authority, state and county DOTs, so there's the other infrastructure stuff, you know, even beyond us, is what are demands on existing resources, intersection improvements, 5 Mile Atlantic, the state DOT is looking at a roundabout for that intersection right now to improve, transportation through that area. So there's other demands ongoing that, we'll reach out to those groups as well and, keep you guys advised of that. But, gas and electric, they're obviously not unlimited, so they're trying to, back up our resources, so we meet with them and tell them where we see development coming, where we see new stuff going on, so they can, be ahead of it and, provide, redundant services. They're taking out old service loops that, no longer viable and doing some upgrades to their system, which is good to see as well.
Has there ever been any exploration into alternative like green energy, like putting in solar fields or wind power or anything like that?
That's one of the sections I like to add is about sustainability. The town, it hasn't gone up yet, but if you look over the DPW facility, we've got a big area fenced off. That area is all slated for solar panels over there. Once that's done, that will offset 75% of the town facility usage of electricity. So the town's been proactive on that. The county already has a facility over on the Gloria Drive landfill. It's property that they own, but the county's got a big facility over there on that. We have not seen much as far as wind. We've seen a little. We've had people here and there that kind of have some home wind with it. We are looking at, even on our own town code, doing geothermal, at least allowing or having this parameter set up for it. We do, obviously, you've seen a lot of solar out there now. There are solarized programs that the town could become, kind of a mediator to negotiate better solar rates for people, if everybody kind of came together on it. There's CCA, which is community centered, I'm going to kill the acronym. No, basically there's,
I got the internet.
the town can look at leveraging buying power off the grid at a cheaper price than what's out there now. Right now, we haven't kind of jumped into that because basically it's an opt-out program, so everybody's in. So that would be the town basically saying, we're going to be your power supplier, and then everybody that doesn't want to be in has to opt out.
Is that like Fairport Electric?
Yeah.
Kind of, yeah. Fairport's kind of done that. That's a new thing that's kind of come up out there, so we are looking at that. We do have an energy advisory committee chaired by the supervisor that meets monthly that we do talk about some of the stuff, but that's what I think the new sustainability section comes in. Ag districts, we've had a lot of pressure and a lot of people going around looking at putting solar farms on ag properties and doing stuff out there. Wind is the one that's haven't seen a lot with wind, but
The price of solar cells has come down a lot.
But solar's come down, it's been subsidized so long, that's done. Electric car charging stations, we've been promoting that for a while, we've got some here. We're promoting that with plazas and having other spots provide electric car charging stations. So yeah, I think that's, to me, that's another important section of our code, is looking to the future, is where do we see the community going, and being more eco-friendly and better to the environment.
More electric vehicles.
Yep. I like it.
So speaking of more information for you, just want to let people know that we met with the Shadow Pines advisory group last week, and we were kind of going through their next sequence of meetings. And we talked about trying to get you as much information as possible, what, kind of maybe some interaction even there too. But one important date coming up is Tuesday, November 16th at 7 p.m. The town will be scheduling a public information meeting for the topic of the Shadow Pines Land Use Advisory Committee. It's a meeting that will be open to the public to voice their comments and suggestions to the group. And again, we'll be making all the information public as soon as we get it scheduled and go through our legal notice practices. But that is something that will be coming up, and we'll email the groups as that gets closer as reminders. You're welcome to attend it,
I was gonna say.
listen in on what was being said. It is being televised and recorded. Huh?
You said 16th is a Friday.
Oh,
I thought it was Tuesday that.
Tuesday the 6th?
13.
probably 13. Wow, good
It
calendar.
was the 13th.
Yeah, thank you for that highlight. We'll clarify that date and send that out.
Yeah, it's a
We're-
13. Sorry. It's a
But
13. That's not
obviously, that'll be televised, so that's basically information gathering for that group is, back to rec programs, what do people think and envision for the Shadow Pines property? whether it's recreation, whether it's a community center, whether it's
Open space.
open space, whether, whatever, but, collect public input on that date, so that'll remain open, so people can send in emails, can watch online, can, attend and
It's not meant to be a debate, just offer your thoughts and suggestions and on to the next person.
Okay.
7.
7:00.
7's a popular time.
But again, we'll video that, so
Can't affirm any more something that's.
I can't make
so
it.
you can watch it online afterwards, and
Always a
obviously we
replay.
can share back with this group here.
Any more questions? And you can
Yeah,
watch it online. It's
I'll do
nice.
that. Sure you can get on the couch.
Good.
Should be drinking
Does anyone have any other questions tonight? I think it's, again, a lot of information. Good information, though. And like Mark said, our goal next time will be to kind of jump into some of these categories that were outlined in the in the comp plan, and kind of explain how they got there and what we might see as an opportunity to improve that, update it, and look at other topics as well, such as sustainability, wellness, maybe diving a little deeper into the residential components and how mixed use is incorporated with that and commercial, things like that.
And then hopefully, then we'll keep the group updated as we hear from the rec master plan group and the Shadow Pines group. Obviously, both those will dovetail into what you guys do, and we'll pass any data we have from them. We've also talked about, and we'll still continue to pursue any other guests to come in. Obviously, having Chris Bilo from our rec department come in and share his thoughts, as well as other town staff for our facility needs. But we also talked in the past, and whether the group wants it eventually is, do we want to hear from real estate people, bankers, developers, senior, other groups or outside groups to kind of share what their thoughts and ideas are, with the group, or where they see trends going on new development and what they see in the marketplace. Or
Certainly
something.
need the school district to.
And the school district, yeah. Yep.
So, and maybe with the town board, with some of the proposed development, what's on the slate now, what seems to be churning would be valuable too. Some of that we can do self-study by going out, but it would be nice if maybe a condensed presentation is, okay, here's the things that are trending the most likely that we're seeing as the town board, but also be valuable.
Did you show the mixed-use projects at the last meeting?
We went over it last week briefly. We didn't get too deep, and I kind of just did a high-level overview of what was there and what was going on.
That's the reason I was thinking it might be nice to have a little more, dive a little deeper.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
Yeah, we're looking at
We also had quite a discussion tonight on agriculture and what's new, so to speak, in agriculture. We get
It's more-
some current participants, and I like the Wickhams come in and just to see how things are changing from the days of just
Farming.
corn and
Yeah,
Yep.
so to speak, to
ag entertainment.
and or just community supported agriculture.
Yeah, that's
as a community participation.
Oh, that's great.
Another
great presentation.
possibility.
Oh, and we talked about the town, sort of preserving the land through the 2001 open space plan. So I think it would be valuable also to hear from organizations that help preserve open space, Genesee Land Trust, something like that, to have some representative from groups like that to say, well, what's the best way in a changing environment,
Benefits.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll on our end start reaching out to some of these groups and
Those will likely be
contacting them and-
things that will take place after the holidays for those
yeah,
presentations.
it'll be down the road, but at least we can do some initial conversations and get some of that stuff working, and then say we'll kind of dig into the document and kind of get a little deeper and get everybody into that a bit, and then I think November, December, we're kind of looking at maybe budgeting one meeting a month, just knowing the holidays and everybody's timeframes and schedules, and then maybe going into the first part of next year, doing our own public information meeting, which then allows the public to come in and share their thoughts with you guys of what they see, think, envision, and then take that data and then start to get turning on what we're looking at going into the spring and summer, if that kind of to lay out a vision of at least how we see it, but we'll follow your guys' direction. We're here to kind of lead you guys along, so.
All happy faces, right? Yes.
Thanks for coming out on a hot, sweaty Tuesday night.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Don't worry, there won't be too many more of those.
Just gonna say, I'm gonna take them while I can.
Too many more Yankee